Sabrina Carpenter is having a breakout year. Her single Please 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 peaked at #1 on the Billboard charts. And the crazy thing is, it feels like her song before that, Espresso, was even bigger. So far, Espresso has peaked at #3 on the Billboard Hot 100, but it's one of those songs that you just can't escape. If you go outside, you might hear it in a cafe or blasting from a car. If you go on Twitter, you might see people referencing the lyrics. And as a lot of people have pointed out, if you go on Spotify and you let the app autoplay after whatever you were listening to, it seems like there's a pretty good chance you're gonna get Espresso. It's gotten to the point that publications like Vox are reporting on the autoplay phenomenon and adding to the discourse. The article, The Spotify Conspiracies About Espresso Explained, by Rebecca Jennings, seeks to answer the question of why this song and a few others are so heavily recommended within Spotify's algorithm. And guess what? For some people, it's happening for Please 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 as well, not just Espresso. But Sabrina Carpenter isn't the only artist that people have called out for the seemingly high chance that they show up in the algorithm on autoplay. Tommy Richmond's breakout single $1 Million Baby and Chappell Roan's Good Luck Babe are two other songs that were highlighted in the Vox article. I've seen some people mention Tommy specifically on the internet as well, but if you want to know more about his rise, you should check out my video on it. I'll link it in the description. The cynical social media approach is to blame these artists for their oversaturation, or to accuse their teams or labels of controlling it, or maybe even paying for it. Well, are they? It's complicated, but isn't that illegal? Isn't that called payola? We'll talk about that too. And along the way, we'll see that a ton of artists, including me, are technically paying Spotify for an algorithm boost. If you've been recommended a song on Spotify through the algorithm recently, there is a pretty decent chance that Spotify was paid for that. But before we get into how that's happening, if you like videos on music like this, I would really appreciate a like and subscribe. I do one every week. And if you want to see those videos early, go to my Instagram, HADJI Gaviota, throw me a follow, and join my broadcast channel. I post all the links in there one day early. Also, just wanted to give a big thanks to everyone who's checked out my recent song and video, Tricky. It's been really cool seeing people come over from the YouTube channel. If you like the instrumental playing in the background, it's that song, so that should give you an idea of what it's like. I put the link in the description too. Okay, back to the video. So before we can talk about what's going on with Sabrina Carpenter or these other huge artists, we need to talk about how Spotify's autoplay system works. Let's hear it right from them on their website. On their support page under Autoplay, it says, when you reach the end of an album, playlist, or selection of songs, Spotify automatically plays similar songs so the music never stops. This is of course an optional feature that can be turned on or off. Now let's see Autoplay in action. Let's go to my latest single, Tricky, and play it off the album page and then see what happens next. I'm not expecting to see a Sabrina Carpenter song in here or anything like that. That would be blatantly ridiculous because we don't really have a lot of musical overlap. A Tommy Richmond song wouldn't be that crazy. Me and Tommy actually have unreleased music together, but there's no way Spotify would know that. Let's get into it. Okay, I played it out loud in the cafe by accident while I was writing this script, so you might see me turn the volume down. I'm waiting 35 seconds because I want to get paid. Don't judge me. Next up is Greek, an artist friend of mine whose merch I'm literally wearing right now. But I also love their music and I listen to it a lot. Next up was another song of mine, Runner's High. It's one of my more popular songs. Remember this one. We're going to talk about why I think this one came up next in a little bit. Next is You Don't Have to Change by Ace Hashimoto. Not familiar with this song or this artist. I was doing this with the volume off, but I went and I put my AirPods in to listen in the cafe, and it's dope. I saved it. I really like this song. Next is Sweet Love by Josh Fudge. Same situation, not familiar with the song or the artist, but I liked it and I saved it. Next up was a song called Nonchalant Demo by Carter Ace, another artist who I like a lot. The song is fire. It just came out, but I've already saved and been listening to it a lot. I got a bunch more of like my artist friends or people that I'm familiar with as I skip through, and then eventually I got one of my own songs again, 1-800-Purgatory. But no Espresso, no $1 Million Baby, no Chappell Roan. Two of the artists that they played, Huron John and Kyle Lux, are in my Fans Also Like section. The artists that I didn't know seemed to be appropriate for what my music sounds like or what somebody who liked my music might want to hear. Kind of makes me think that the autoplay system is working in terms of showing people stuff that they might actually be interested in. So what happens if we pick some music that's a little bit more popular than mine? I really like this artist Juliette Ivy, and she makes more pop influenced music, I guess. She's got almost 500,000 monthly listeners. I don't think it would be like super insane if a Sabrina Carpenter song played after hers. Let's see what happens when I go to one of her more recent songs, Is It My Face? First up was another song of hers, 4'2", which I've been playing a lot in the last 2 weeks because I love it. Next was Confusion Song by Luna Lee. Then Undecided by Christian Korea and Cautious Clay. Then Pick Your Brain by Lynn Lapid. Eventually I got to another artist that I know and like named Nathany. Most of these songs seem to be pretty appropriate recommendations. Again, none of the usual suspects popped up for me. Alright, now we're gonna try it with some serious pop songs. When I searched up Fortnite by Taylor and Post Malone, and I let the autoplay run, sure enough, I got 2 of the people that I've named so far, Chappell Roan and Tommy Richmond. I also got some other pop artists that I listen to, like Charlie XCX. I got this one Camilo Cabello song that I really like. Song's fire. I haven't heard the rest of the album, but that song slaps. And I got SZA and Omar Apollo, who are 2 like popular artists that kind of stay in my rotation. I didn't get any Sabrina Carpenter, which is interesting because she literally toured with Taylor Swift. I got other pop artists that I don't listen to, like Gracie Abrams. I kept on skipping, and at no point did I get a Sabrina Carpenter song. What gives? The truth is, Spotify is recommending me these songs because I actually like Tommy Richmond and Chappell Roan. Tommy Richmond was in my top 5 Spotify Wrapped artists last year, before $1 Million Baby. And I finally checked out and enjoyed Chappell Roan for the first time last week. And I've listened to Good Luck Babe willingly a few times. I mean, I even tweeted about it. I have never streamed a Sabrina Carpenter song to my knowledge. It's nothing personal. Sometimes a song is played so much outside that I never really feel the need to listen to it myself. I like Espresso. It's catchy. It's stuck in my head all the time. But I don't really feel like compelled to stream it. I just don't listen to a lot of like the big pop girly music, you know? Many of the people who are accusing Sabrina Carpenter of using some sort of cheat code to get into the autoplay system are stans of other pop artists or people who listen to a lot of pop music in general. The algorithm thinks you're gonna like this music because it doesn't understand that you only hate Sabrina Carpenter because she's not your favorite one. I mean, all the stuff that we've talked about so far is kind of like pop music, but I'm talking about like the big pop girlies. You know what I'm talking about. So it makes sense that Spotify would think that people would want to listen to one of the biggest pop songs in the world. You can see the voice of reason kind of saying the same thing on Twitter a lot as well, but I felt like people were talking so much about this autoplay thing that I really wanted to investigate it for myself. And the only way to really test this out would be to make a brand new Spotify account with no listening data and really start to see what happens. So I did that, and I picked Fortnite by Taylor Swift and Post Malone again. And after like 15 skips through, I still got no Sabrina Carpenter. I thought maybe that the country-ishness of Post Malone was like throwing it off a little bit, because I kept getting like Zach Bryan and stuff. So I thought maybe let me try a non-Post Malone Taylor Swift song and see what happens. So I picked Down Bad, and it still took literally 30 skips before I got a Sabrina Carpenter song. I think at this point, I'm ready to clear Sabrina Carpenter of some sort of specific wrongdoing. She is clearly not some special case who is using the Spotify autoplay feature to get ahead in her career. Her songs are popular, and thus they get recommended to a lot of people who listen to other popular songs. But it's not some egregious thing that's only happening to her. And her second single, Please Please Please, going #1 shows that Espresso wasn't some sort of fluke one-hit wonder, or some kind of astroturfed hit song. I mean, she's toured on the biggest tour ever with Taylor Swift so far. She's a former Disney starlet, and this is her 6th album. She's been working late because she's a singer. Now I know what you're thinking. Case closed, video over, that's it. We answered the question. But what if I told you that we're just getting started? You see, analyzing the world of Spotify autoplay opens up a can of worms that goes very deep. Because the truth is, not all songs are made equal in Spotify's algorithm. And I'm not just talking about some sort of ranking of popularity. Certain artists, although not all of them, are actually given the power to choose to boost certain songs in the algorithm. In 2023, Spotify began rolling out a new program called Discovery Mode. On their website, they call it a tool for artists and music marketers designed to help you find new listeners when it matters to you the most. Discovery Mode is an optional thing that certain artists can opt into on a month-to-month basis. You need to be using a specific distributor for your music and also have over 25,000 monthly listeners. What Discovery Mode does is it enables you to pick some songs and give them priority in the algorithm. You can take a look at the inside of my Discovery Mode, as it's not available to every artist yet, but I've had it for about a year. So every month, I tell Spotify which of my songs I want to prioritize. And I can pick as few as 0 songs, or I can put my whole catalog in there as long as the songs are eligible. For me, I usually pick songs that are newer, or songs that I personally believe need a little more shine, or ones that I've seen people like, so I want to prioritize them reaching more people, because they'll have a better shot of someone being like, hey, I like this, you know? There are a few different situations where Discovery Mode comes into play on Spotify. The discovery mode contexts currently include Spotify Radio, Autoplay, and Spotify mixes like your daily mix, artist mix, mood mixes, decade mixes, and probably those weird day lists with the interesting names. So basically, artists get a say in which songs their listeners, either new or old, are going to get in these algorithmic contexts. So let's say you've moved in a kind of different direction with your music and your old stuff doesn't really align with it. You can put your new stuff in discovery mode so that it increases the chances of people finding you based on what you got going on right now. For me, I have one song hitting different on a label, which means that I get paid less when that song does well. It also seems to do really well in Asia, but not as much in the United States, which is mostly where I tour. So I tend not to put that song in discovery mode because I'm not really getting my bang for my buck. You know what I'm saying? I mean, this program sounds like a good thing for artists, but you should know there's no such thing. And your next question should be, what's the catch? Unsurprisingly, something like this does not come for free, but you don't pay upfront like you do with like the marquee ads on Spotify, like the little boxes that pop up, or sometimes like the home screen showcases. Artists pay for those, by the way, if you didn't know that. In this case, Spotify takes 30% of the revenue generated in those discovery mode contexts. Those contexts are all the algorithmic ones that I went over before. Spotify only takes 30% of the streams that happen specifically in that context. So for example, if I am listening on Autoplay and I save a song, that one stream from the Autoplay, Spotify takes 30% of. But now that I saved it, if I go and listen to it in my own playlist, the artist gets the full thing. Spotify doesn't take 30% of that. So in exchange for putting your song out there, they basically say you get less of a royalty rate for those cheaper, easier, algorithmically generated streams. Spotify calls it a promotional rate. When this service first came out, I thought of it as free money, basically. As long as I get an increase of over 30% in my streams, then financially it's worth it to give up 30% of the revenue of those songs. And looking at the data from June 2024, my most recent month that's available, it looks like that's happening for all 16 of the songs that I enrolled in the program. We'll come back to these numbers in a sec, but in general, you can see that a few of my songs are really booming in the discovery mode context. Of course, the obvious downside is that now they're charging me for something that used to be free. My older songs like HADJI would absolutely bang in these algorithmic contexts. According to my stats, it got over 200,000 plays from radio and daily mix alone. From 2023 onward, those streams were at a lesser rate, assuming that I opted into the program, and if I didn't opt into the program, I was scared that I would lose out to the artists who were opting into the program. So I didn't really feel like I had a choice. But given that it looks like I was going to get more than a 30% boost from doing this, I was cautiously optimistic. My somewhat sunnier point of view was not shared by everybody when Spotify first announced Discovery Mode. When the program was announced back in 2020, the Recording Academy cooked them in a blog post. Here's a quote from their Chief Advocacy Officer, Daryl Friedman. Spotify's promotional royalty rate is yet another example of how the company avoids paying music creators their fair share. It's a predatory tool that can be likened to payola, and it's troubling that Spotify introduced this at a time when music creators are seeing their livelihoods devastated amidst the pandemic. With Spotify payouts already so low, I don't see how this experiment will benefit any musicians who are already struggling to earn a living wage. There's a very important word in that quote that we need to understand: payola. Payola is the word used to describe pay-to-play practices in the music industry. It's been around as long as recorded music has been around. And I'm going to speedrun the history of that term real quick, so you guys don't get too bored. But if you want to learn more, there's a great Vice article about the history of payola that I will put in the description. Labels wanted their songs to sell well, of course, and the best way to accomplish that was to get them played on the radio. So they would pay radio DJs to play it. In the late 1950s, this practice was made illegal, and radio stations were now legally obliged to disclose when they were being paid to play a song. That, of course, did not stop the act of payola from happening under the table. The new meta for running payola after the laws changed is that the labels hire an independent promoter who then showers the radio station in money and gifts to push particular songs to get played on the airwaves. Regardless of how exactly it's still happening, it's still happening. Aubrey O'Day from the 2000s girl group Danity Kane went on Sway in the Morning back in 2017 to talk about how it works in today's music industry, or 2017's music industry, and about how much money labels would spend to break an artist on the radio.
It's like $60K for urban, 160 for pop, and like 25 right now.
That's
for
minimal.
And it's not the same type of payola that happened when everybody got busted for it, when the program directors were collecting it, because now that's illegal. But it's like it's through an independent party, who is usually somebody that worked for one of the majors that have now been fired or left, and then they hustle these records influentially to the radio.
It's funny because 7 years ago, she was talking about how the only place that artists really make money is on tour. But if you see my video on arena tours, you'll see how even that is shrinking these days. Yikes. So flash forward to today, where streaming services are as important as ever. Not only is that how the vast majority of people are listening to music in 2024, but it's also where sales for most artists are being driven from. With the exception of some bigger artists who can still move physical units when they drop their albums, almost everybody else is seeing this happen through streams. There is a lot of fraud on streaming services, and that's been well documented, especially in the Vice documentary that had the late, great Michael K. Williams going in and interviewing the people who run these stream farms. I recommend Matty Balls' video on stream farms if you're looking for a deeper look into those. Obviously, stream farms are illegal. It's not directly illegal to pay a promoter to promote your song on the radio, but it's illegal for the radio to not disclose that they were directly paid to play something. So in 1998, Limp Bizkit infamously paid a radio station in Portland, Oregon to play their song Counterfeit. But this wasn't considered payola because before and after, every time they would play the song, they would say presented by Interscope, which was Limp Bizkit's label. So you knew the label was paying for it. According to payola laws, which clearly have plenty of loopholes, this was A-okay. Why does this matter? Because Spotify does not tell the listener when a song that's being played through Autoplay is in discovery mode. So the listener has no idea when somebody else is essentially paying for that song to enter their ears. Shouldn't this be considered payola? Morally, and with common sense, you can pretty much say it's the same thing. But according to the laws that actually govern what is and isn't payola, the Communications Act amendments of 1960, it isn't, because those laws apply specifically and only to terrestrial radio stations. Now in 1960, the radio was everything. And former President Dwight Eisenhower called the issue of paying for radio play one of public morality. It's a lot like the discussions we see about the Second Amendment today. Obviously, when the Second Amendment was written, guns took like 15 minutes to load. But now, with the guns that we have today, things look different in the world, right? And I would argue that streaming has changed music just as much as gun companies have changed guns. It's a whole different thing. So if we're going to talk about what it looks like legally, I think these laws from the 60s might be a little bit outdated. And there is some push for reform in terms of how laws in general are designed to affect musicians. The Living Wage for Musicians Act, which has been floating around Congress for a little bit, but I honestly am not sure that it's particularly likely to pass and become a real law, would make sure that artists get at least 1 cent per stream, which would be 2.5 times as much as they're currently getting on the average Spotify stream. I have not seen any discussion on updating the payola laws to regulate things like Spotify's discovery mode. At least not mainstream enough that real congressman and the president is talking about it. I'm not necessarily arguing in favor of that either. I'm not sure what would be better for me as a musician. Because hey, according to the data that Spotify is showing me, getting rid of discovery mode would put less money in my pocket as an artist at a time when I'm already not making a living wage just off my music. If payola in some form is going to exist no matter what, as the last 60 years have shown us, at least this time it's a payola that independent artists like me can actually take advantage of, and you don't just have to be signed to a label who can just push whatever buttons they want. Although, we'll see a little more about that in a little bit. And at least you don't have to have the required cash flow, and they could just take it off the stream instead of you showing up with $60,000 like, put my in the algorithm, you know? I don't necessarily have an answer for like what the right thing to do is here. It's complicated, but I'm curious if you guys do, so I would be happy to see that in the comments. Now it's time to get to the real spicy stuff. Spotify does not tell us what songs are being given to us as a result of discovery mode, but that's sure as hell not going to stop me from trying to figure it out. So let's go back to some of the songs that auto played after I played my song Tricky. The first one I got, remember, was Virginia Creeper by Greek. That's a song that I've already listened to a bunch of times. Like 2 hours before I filmed this, I went to his pop-up in New York, which is where I got this t-shirt, and I asked him personally, do you have discovery mode turned on? And he said no. I forgot to take pics or videos, but like, how else would I have this shirt, you know? You're just gonna have to believe me, or ask him, I guess. So you remember how my song Runner's High came up after. That song is currently in discovery mode for me. It's not insane for the algorithm to recommend for a HADJI Gaviota song to come after a HADJI Gaviota song, but perhaps discovery mode does influence which of those HADJI Gaviota songs is gonna be played next. Both times I auto-played after Tricky, because I did it a second time as well, I got Runner's High immediately. Again, it's not that surprising because it's also one of my most popular songs and one of the ones that's most successful within the algorithm. But the interesting thing is both times that I skipped through the autoplay after Tricky, I got some HADJI songs that weren't in discovery mode, like 1-800-Purgatory or Catch These Hands. I have like 16 songs in discovery mode, and still, it would give me, in the second or third time it gave me one of my songs, one that was not in the program. Let's push further though. I'm not done yet. You remember those two artists that I was unfamiliar with? Ace Hashimoto and Josh Fudge? Well, I went on Instagram and I asked both of them if they used discovery mode. Ace Hashimoto told me that he didn't, but he was going to check it out. And Josh Fudge said that that particular track was not eligible because the distributor that the song was uploaded through was not on that list, but that he was using discovery mode for a different song. That's interesting. There was a song that played on mine that I'm featured on called Supermodel by Tullis. So I texted Tullis to ask him if he had discovery mode turned on. And he said, "What's discovery mode?" And when I told him what it was, he was not very happy about its existence. Another song that I'm featured on, Indecisive with Ben Beal and Elijah Hu, also played, and when I asked Ben about it, he told me that it was in discovery mode. I got a Huron John song recommended, and he's a friend of mine, so I texted him and asked him if Huron Disco was in discovery mode, and he said yes. Kevin Holiday had multiple of his songs come up, so I asked him, and he sent me a list of his songs in discovery mode, and it was all from that list. Another artist who I'm friends with, Masho, has one song in discovery mode, but the one that played for me was not that one. Again, interesting. What is there to make from all this? From what I can tell, it isn't necessarily the case that all the songs in autoplay are from discovery mode, which would be a lot of people's fears probably about this program. Even if an artist has some songs in discovery mode, the algorithm still might recommend other ones. Perhaps the algorithm thinks it knows better than the artist about what people are going to want to hear. And I'm not necessarily saying they're wrong for that. My favorite songs of mine are not necessarily the ones that have performed best in the algorithm or have the most streams. Given the choice to pick which songs to push, I'm including songs of mine like Midnight Snack, which is like the 7th most popular song on a 10-track album. But to me, that song is fucking underrated. I think that song is a banger, so I'm gonna push it out there anytime I get a chance to. But hey, it might just be me. And I'm not including a song like Hittin' Different because of the reasons that I mentioned before, but that's one of my most popular songs in the algorithm. It does make for a great instrumental outro on a YouTube video though. The very interesting thing about discovery mode and streams that I hadn't really thought about until I started making this video is that for a listen to count as a stream, the person listening has to make it through 30 seconds. And before, only the artist would really care if somebody made it through 30 seconds of their song or not. Why would Spotify care? Someone's still on their platform skipping through songs, it's cool with them, right? But now Spotify has a vested interest, a financial interest in the listener making it through 35 seconds of the song that they recommend. Because if the person skips that song, Spotify doesn't get 30% of that stream either. So it behooves Spotify, I like that word, behooves. It behooves Spotify to recommend somebody a song that they're actually going to make it through at least 30 seconds of. They walk a tightrope in balancing which songs they're going to recommend to people. Because obviously they're incentivized to pick discovery mode ones because they'll actually make money if they pick one and you make it through one. But at the same time, they don't want to give you the wrong song just because it's in discovery mode. Because then you'll get so annoyed with the algorithm that you'll close the app, which is their worst nightmare. They want the app to be open. That's what they care about. Yes, they like making money off discovery mode, but what they really care about is market share. And they want that app to be open for as long as possible, because otherwise you might switch to Apple Music or Tidal, and they can't have that. Just an interesting thought that came up in the middle of making this video that I wasn't really expecting to talk about. So when we talk about discovery mode, in terms of artists like Sabrina Carpenter and Chappell Roan, of course they're all able to access discovery mode because they very much clear the bar for what the stats are, right? They both have more than 25,000 monthly listeners. They probably have more than 25,000 people listening to them right now. But as the Vox article says, it's impossible to say for sure how many or which artists use discovery mode because Spotify doesn't label its songs as such. The big issue with assuming these artists are just using discovery mode to get ahead is that campaigns are set monthly and they're determined by the 11th of the month before. I had to set my July campaign by June 11th. So anything I release after June 11th is not eligible for discovery mode in July, like Tricky. Tricky is not a part of that right now. My song Kick It Like We Used To, which I released on April 10th, didn't enter the discovery mode program until June 11th. So for Espresso, which actually released on April 11th, way to fucking step on my release date, Sabrina. If her team does use the program, they probably wouldn't have been able to put it in there until like June 11th. The original semi-viral tweet about Espresso getting autoplayed everywhere that the Vox article quoted and all that was from May 15th. So unless labels are given a special version of discovery mode, they can just push whenever they want. Which I mean is possible, but it's never really been disclosed that something like that exists. I mean, if you work at a label and you want to tell me that in the comments, please let us know. But it's likely that their song was being autoplayed without discovery mode being a part of it. As we've seen, plenty of songs do get autoplayed that aren't a part of discovery mode. Also, her second single, Please Please Please, has been getting accused of these autoplay shenanigans as well, but it was getting accused like right after it came out. So again, assuming what we know about discovery mode, it wouldn't really make sense for that to be the case here. This logic applies to the smaller artists too. That Carter Ace song that played, which I love, it's not eligible for discovery mode yet, so there's no way that's how it was getting in my autoplay. It just doesn't seem like discovery mode is the Scooby-Doo villain behind the mask, if you ask me. There is something much more sobering and obvious to be talked about when we talk about labels in Spotify. You see, why would labels even bother using the tools that are available to the common man like me? They're already shareholders in Spotify. Universal Music Group owns about 3.5% of Spotify. Sabrina Carpenter is signed to a label that is under Universal, and she's also signed to publishing under Universal as well. Chappell Roan also signed to a label under Universal. Their label owns a piece in Spotify. Obviously, I have no proof of this, but it wouldn't surprise me if there was some sort of algorithmic boost that UMG artists could get on this platform that they own a little piece of. What's the point in owning a piece of Spotify if you can't use it to your benefit if you're UMG, right? It's important to remember that this is not necessarily a button that UMG will press on every single artist that they release. Per Billboard, in Q1 of 2024, Universal owned 38.23% of the entire music market. There's no way they're going to be doing this to every single artist that they have. They have too many artists. And there's plenty of artists you can find who are signed to some UMG subsidiary who don't have that many monthly listeners because they're still getting their career started. I'm not trying to make fun of them. It's it doesn't automatically mean you have all these fans. And it definitely doesn't mean that the label cares about you. However, when an artist has some real life motion, as the kids call it, I'm guessing that UMG can push a button to make it go crazier. Does that make sense? Because that's my hypothesis here. Not an accusation, just a guess. Still, this autoplay situation gives us an opportunity to revisit the fascinating and terrifying realities of the Spotify algorithm. It's an unenviable situation that Spotify is in sometimes. How do you make all the artists in the world happy? Taking a look at my discovery mode results again, what at first appears to be super positive can actually be read as extremely grim. Looking at my June results, well, you can see I'm getting a huge boost in listenership. The intent rates are really low. They hover around 1 to 2% for most of my songs, with the highest one, HADJI, being a little bit over 3%. That means that for most of my songs in discovery mode, out of 100 people who are given them in the autoplay algorithm or some other algorithmic context, only 1 to 2 of those people are saving the songs or putting them in a playlist. Does that just mean my music sucks? I mean, if you catch me on a bad day, I'd probably tell you that. But the truth is much more complicated. My song Tricky, again, which came out on Wednesday, and I'm recording this on Friday, so I have Wednesday and Thursday's data to look at, has had 373 unique listeners and 179 saves. That means almost 50% of the people who have clicked on that song Tricky have saved it. That's an awesome save rate. The conventional wisdom for save rates a few years ago was 10 to 20% saves to listeners ratio. Would be pretty good. I'm blowing that out of the water right now. Maybe Tricky is just better than all of my other songs. I mean, it's possible, but that still doesn't feel like it would truly explain the full situation here. The truth is, the autoplay format is one of the most passive ways to listen to music. You're not even intentionally looking for new music, like people who go into their Discover Weekly playlist kind of are. You're just given it after whatever you were listening to finishes. You might not even have your phone in your hand. You might be driving responsibly. So even if you like the song that's playing, you're just gonna have to remember what it is because you can't hit the save button. Spotify has basically recreated the radio. Autoplay is basically a robot running a radio station for you, with some ideas about what you would like or wouldn't like, but also weighed against what the world likes and doesn't like. So songs that are popular, even if they aren't popular in your phone or in your household, they're going to be more likely to show up in these contexts. Of course, the difference between the old days of radio and today's streaming economy is that the listener can just put on whatever the hell they want, provided that they aren't so lazy that they wouldn't want to hit one button. I mean, you don't even have to unlock your phone to skip, right? It's the easiest thing in the world. You have your AirPods in, you can give it 2 little clicks, and there you go. So it's not the exact same thing, and it's also pretty obvious that these autoplay streams are less valuable than a radio play, because if people don't like it, they can just go to anything else. And also, you could have thousands of people listening to one radio play at the same time. Music discovery on streaming services is unbelievably passive. I'd be willing to bet that more than 1 to 2% of the people who hear my songs in autoplay contexts or whatever actually kind of like them. But only so many people take the action to go and save the song. You can extrapolate this attitude further and further. Some people might save a song or two for me, but they're not going to hit the follow button on Spotify, and they might not even click on my profile. They just save the songs when they come up on autoplay. Other people who maybe click on me, they might go to my profile, check out 2-3 songs, but they're not going to hit the follow button. Some people might hit the follow button on Spotify, but they're not going to go check me out on Instagram, where then maybe they see more of my personality or see some of the videos that I spend a lot of time making. Each time you ask a consumer or a customer or whatever marketing word you want to use to describe these people, each time you ask them to do something a little bit further, the amount of people who are going to do it drop off, right? It's just common business. And when it comes to autoplay, they were at the lowest of the low in terms of like the amount of work you did to catch them, which means they got the lowest of the low intent rate to do more stuff. Part of the reason why TikTok and Instagram Reels have been running the meta of music discovery for the past few years is because you see a person when you hear their music usually, or you see something, even if it's not them, and you have a positive or maybe a negative reaction to whatever you see. You know, if you're the guys who make fun of me for my gap tooth in my Instagram Reels comments, then it might be a negative reaction. But if you like the song, then it's a positive reaction, right? Either way, you have a better idea of who somebody is and what they stand for. And a lot of music fans care about that. Think about your favorite artists. You care about them more than just good songs. Yes, nice. Like, there are things that you like about them that go deeper than that. And you don't really get that from streaming them on Spotify. You get that from everything around that and the worlds that they build. Spotify is not going to help you get that deeper connection. If they paid more, maybe more people could make a living off their royalties alone. And look, don't get me wrong. There are a ton of people who make a living just off their streaming royalties. But it takes a lot of listeners to get there. But even for those people, to sell concert tickets, to build a real fan base, and have a community, you have to wonder, no matter how the Spotify algorithm works, will it ever be enough?